Hello from Captain Ferris. Enjoy this lore and order video from Gaming Harry. Inmates, that's an order.
Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of Law & Order, the video series where I look at and unpack stories from games. In this one, we'll be looking at the spiritual successor to Dead Space, the Callisto Protocol. Before we get into it, Striking Distance released an amazing set of 6 podcasts starring Gwendolyn Christie and Michael Ironside about a skip tracer named Percy. It gives great backstory into this universe and what happened in the lead up to Callisto Protocol. Anyway, this game captured the feel and vibe of Dead Space perfectly and was a great way to get ready for the Dead Space remake coming soon. In this game, you play the captain of a ship who is thrown into Black Iron Prison on one of Jupiter's dead moons, Callisto. Despite the negative review bombing on launch day, because that's the cool thing to do nowadays, this game was actually fairly decent, but I have seen a lot of people crapping on the story, mostly from game journalists who rushed through the game on journalist difficulty in order to get their reviews out first. The story had its flaws, sure, but I got more invested with it with every small detail that I found. Now, the usual disclaimer, there will be spoilers in this video as this game is fairly new, so you have been warned. But with all that being said, let's get into the video. It's the year 2320. Pilots Jacob Lee and his first officer Max Barrow, working for the United Jupiter Company, shortened to UJC, have been contracted to ferry shipments between 2 of Jupiter's 4 moons, Europa and the dead moon Callisto, which is home to the UJC-operated Black Iron Prison, a maximum security penitentiary. They have departed Callisto and are heading back to Europa. After watching a news report of a terrorist group called the Outbreak, apparently responsible for numerous attacks on civilians in the sector in the last few months, Jacob and Max argue about why they keep going back and forth from Callisto to Europa, and so on and so forth. Jacob responds that they are making enough money from the job to be able to retire for good once they're done with that job. During their minor disagreement, Jacob's ship, the UJC Charon, puts out a signal of something being wrong in the cargo hold. Jacob goes to investigate it but finds that they have been boarded. Making his way back to the cockpit, Jacob comes across the Outer Way, who are the ones who boarded the ship. The group's leader, Danny Nakamura, chases Jacob, but he seals the door to the cargo hold and opens the cargo bay doors, leading to the Outer Way members being sucked out into space. Danny shoots the glass, causing the ship to fall apart. Making his way back to his seat to try and help Max take control of the ship, they request clearance to return to and land on Callisto, but the request is denied. Jacob and Max then crash land the ship onto Callisto. Jacob survives but finds Max in bad shape. Max asks Jacob why he didn't listen to him and then passes away. A hole is cut in the side of the ship by security bots who search the ship for other survivors. Jacob meets Captain Leon Ferris, who is the head of security at Black Iron Prison. Going outside, it's revealed that Danny also survived the crash. After making a call to the prison warden, Duncan Cole, Ferris is ordered to take both Jacob and Danny into custody and return to Black Iron Prison to be incarcerated without any charges against them. Jacob protests, but Ferris doesn't care. To him, he's inmate 521. He meets a doctor, Dr. Caitlin Mahler, who implants Jacob, rather painfully, with a biomarker showing his current health state. After a nightmare involving a strange pink box and a deceased Max, Jacob wakes up to absolute hell. He finds that the prison has been completely overrun. Leaving his cell, he meets a prisoner named Elias Porter, who tells Jacob that he has a plan to get out of the prison. But as Jacob is a pilot, he needs his help. Elias gives Jacob a shiv, a spanner crafted into a sharp object, and Jacob can use it to bypass locked gates and doors. Jacob then goes to the control room and is attacked by a couple of gang members. He manages to overpower them and comes face to face with something, a monster of sorts. Jacob overcomes the monster and defeats it. He then opens the cells and goes to meet with Elias. He tells him what he just saw and encountered, and Elias, not really believing him, tells him to make his way to the watchtower and that he'll meet him there. Fighting more monstrous creatures, Jacob takes an elevator, but it takes him down and not up. According to Elias, speaking over Jacob's comm, he's ended up in solitary, a place where all the crazies are. He witnesses 2 inmates being brutally executed by one of the security bots. Jacob evades the robot and moves through the medical wing. Whatever is going on in the prison has clearly spread throughout the entire facility. Jacob, now having taken the long way around the watchtower, attempts to hide from Captain Ferris, who is himself inside the tower. Then this happens.
You How the fuck did you get in here?
Think I got time for this shit? Okay. Let me see if I got this straight. You crash here, and then this whole place goes to shit. Oh, 5, 2, 1. Look at me when I'm talking to you. What'd you do? Huh? You can tell me. Are you different? Are you special? Why'd the warden? Why'd you lie? I told you. This is my kingdom. It's all yours.
Elias contacts Jacob and tells him there's a safe room up ahead. A short while later, Jacob reaches the safe room and he and Elias finally reunite. Elias gives Jacob a weapon, and after modifying it, Elias tells Jacob that his plan involves them flying a ship off of Callisto, and that Jacob needs to fly it. The ship is in orbit and they need a specific inmate in order to hack into the systems and call it down to Callisto. One problem. This prisoner is in what's known as the SHU, shortened for the Secured Housing Unit. It'll be tough to get in, but thankfully Elias, who is serving a life term and has been there a long time, knows where it is and can guide Jacob to the SHU from the safe room. Leaving the room, Jacob sees a frightening sight. A guard being attacked by a different kind of mutant. The guard then instantly gets back up and tries to attack Jacob. Pods are scattered on the floor, and it seems that whatever has attacked the facility is parasitic, and people turn very fast. Jacob needs to reach the medical wing to get through to a maintenance area. After fighting many more mutants and travelling through the laundry, Jacob finally makes it to the medical wing. Again, everyone is dead, and it seems that some inmates were isolated after showing strange symptoms. Further into the medical wing, Jacob finds a gauntlet worn by the guards called a grip, and can use it to pick up and throw enemies using kinesis. He sees a hologram which shows him something that happened during the outbreak.
Hold it down! I'm trying! What's going on? We don't know. Just hold him! I'll get him on the sedative! Hurry! We got prisoners headed this way! Push him up! Knock him over!
Jacob arrives at the maintenance wing and, well, it's not good. Dead soldiers everywhere, hanging from the ceiling. Elias opens up the maintenance elevator, and after a fairly bumpy landing, Jacob ends up in basement storage. Following another intense fight with new enemies and more monsters, Jacob uses another elevator to ascend to the SHU. Jacob meets up with Elias, who informs Jacob that he needs to ride a gondola over to the actual housing unit. Some guests are waiting for him, but after taking them out, he's not done. He has to fight off waves of mutants while waiting for the power to cycle. He manages it though and moves into the SHU. He goes to see who the prisoner is that they need in order to bring the ship down, and it's Danny Nakamura, leader of the Outer Way terrorist group. She locks Jacob in her cell, and she tells Elias and Jacob that she's not going to help them, and before she leaves she tells Elias not to trust Jacob and that he's not all that he seems. The cell Jacob is in then starts to descend. The cell then docks and Jacob heads towards waste processing. Being attacked by more parasites on the way and having to avoid a trap designed to kill escaping prisoners, Jacob arrives at a control room. Their next goal is to access a tram, which can take them to a hangar. Elias tells him that despite the wonderful view, there's a storm coming, and that Jacob, who can see the hangar in the distance, needs to get to a place called the Habitat Dome. Elias tells Jacob that he used to work down there collecting research, that he made some recordings, and that Jacob's call will trigger the data when he gets close to them. He says that Jacob should follow those recordings and then he will get to the dome, but Elias says that Jacob is on his own, and on the way to the dome there will be no signal to communicate. Elias, however, didn't mention the existence of many turds that Jacob had to wade through, and after this Jacob spots a mutant that seems to possess the ability to use active camouflage. Later on down the line, and following Elias's guidance through his logs, Jacob needs to drain tank number 6 to flush it of water. He encounters a dead guard who, prior to his death, wrote instructions to shoot the tentacles. Jacob finds out what that means. The infected are evolving and can mutate to protect themselves. Whilst he's waiting for the tank to drain, he spots the corpses of the inmates and guards entombed and cocooned in the ceiling. Jacob realizes he's not alone, as a prison PA system indicates an anomaly being present. This is the invisible mutant he saw previously, and after fighting 3 of them, Jacob climbs the ladder to enter the pipe. He is making his way through when he is flushed through the pipe by a wave of water, and in the most Resident Evil way imaginable, Jacob has to navigate himself past hazards whilst being carried through the pipes by the flow of water. He's attacked on his little swim by another mutant and reaches the end of the pipe, manages to pull himself up and to safety. A short while later, Jacob arrives at the Habitat Dome. He sees the tram station in the distance, but Elias, now contactable again, tells him that he needs to power it up before it's operational. Jacob needs to obtain a code off of a nearby dead guard and gets it, powering up the tram station. Jacob manages to make it across the tram station and meets up with Elias, and they run to a nearby airlock. Elias also mentions how the mutants seem to be evolving. He's suited up and says they need to go outside in order to access the tram. But a special guest shows up, Ferris, and he's still kind of human. He pushes a button and flushes Elias and Jacob out of the airlock. Luckily, Jacob had got suited up in time, and after fighting with his visor and being able to breathe again, he makes his way through the heavy snowstorm. He finds Elias in bad shape, who thanks Jacob for helping him get out, and then Elias passes away. Dani Nakamura turns up. It seems she got her own suit and vehicle. She takes out Elias's implant as he knew the prison inside out. The implants allow the transfer of data and memories between humans. She leaves Jacob behind and tells him that if he wants to tag along with her, then he'd better get to a hangar fast. So Jacob leaves for the hangar on foot. He encounters even more infected and mutated enemies and travels through his tunnels with explosive infected, and he finally reaches a garage. He is saved from certain death by Dani, who is fighting a load of mutants inside the garage, and after helping her clear them, she reluctantly agrees that Jacob and herself need to work together in order to get off of Callisto. Dani needs to repair a snowcat, a vehicle, and Jacob needs to get the garage doors open, and does so. He walks through a field of frozen infected and then meets Dani at the snowcat, but instead of going to the hangar, she goes straight for Jacob's crashed ship. Essentially, she's looking for evidence of Jacob's guilt, but to her surprise, she only finds medical supplies. Jacob is hallucinating and sees Max behind Dani and says his implant is messing with his head. They then depart and arrive at the hangar shortly afterwards. They ascend and cool down the ship from orbit, but Warden Cole, or rather his hologram, appears and tells them their journey is essentially over, that no one can escape, and he shoots the ship down, destroying not only it, but the entire hangar too. Jacob and Dani have to run, and Jacob falls off the edge and descends down, avoiding hazards, and ends up crashing through a vent. He sees another vision of Max, a dream, at the place of the terrorist attack on Europa. He then comes to being woken up by Dani. She checks a nearby screen and is surprised to find out that they have managed to get themselves trapped inside an old abandoned colony called Arcas that was sealed off 75 years ago. Black Iron Prison was built on top of the colony, and Dani says that they need to get back into Black Iron and they need to cross the colony in order to do so. Jacob protests and says he doesn't want to go back to Black Iron, but Dani says they need answers as to why on earth the Warden would shoot down one of his own ships, and how this is all connected to what happened on Europa. She says they need to confront Warden Cole. Dani and Jacob head for an elevator which can take them to the colony's transport hub, but the inevitable happens. Jacob and Dani get separated. Jacob has fallen into the depths, into the transport hub. He comes across infected who have been down there for 75 years, in the darkness, and they're completely blind. Nonetheless, after a lot of sneaking around, Jacob resets some breakers for a huge generator, powering up a cargo platform, and he sets off to meet up with Dani. Dani mentions that she's at the colony and the power has come on, and Jacob says he'll meet her soon. He gets onto the cargo platform and has to deal with some guests, along with a two-headed mutant which he duly kills. After this eventual trip, he arrives at the colony. It's freezing there, and Dani tells him to meet her in a brightly lit tower. The same infected creatures are in the colony, and Jacob deals with them and heads to the tower, meeting Dani, who is hooked up to a deceased colonist. Jacob disconnects her and she attacks him, accusing them of killing them all. They descend to the Hightown Square and find the charred remnants of the colonists, murdered by the UJC after an outbreak in the colony, very similar to what is happening in the prison. Dani was essentially able to see the memories of the colonists. They're attacked by yet another two-headed mutation, and after killing it, they get separated again. Jacob has to fight loads more infected and meets up with Dani again, and they pass through a medical wing. They enter into an area with a huge dome. The dome covers what used to be a mine shaft, and they can use this to get back into Black Iron. It's a laboratory, a place in which the UJC scientists would research certain organisms. Dr. Mahler's pre-recorded hologram gives Jacob a guided tour of the lab, talking about the UJC receiving a distress call from the miners and encountering a symptomology they were already somewhat familiar with. Then Jacob sees it. A huge behemoth, an alien life form that came from the depths of Callisto, and in its belly were lots of tiny little parasites or larvae. Jacob finds one of the crates he was transporting to and from Callisto. At the bottom of the crate, underneath the medical supplies, are vials each containing one of the larvae. Jacob realizes that he was in part responsible for the outbreak on Europa. But at this point, guess who crashes the party? It's Ferris, and he's changed slightly. Jacob tries to shoot Ferris, but his bullets do nothing. They fight, and Jacob and Danny take their opportunity to escape Ferris. He gloats as he sees Danny being attacked by a parasite, but Jacob saves her, and they get to another elevator. But Danny isn't doing too well. She's been infected, and she's mutating fast. They arrive back at Black Iron and see the shoe, and the entire prison, enveloped in some sort of biomass. Danny says that the warden's signal is still active in the command tower, but as they move through the next door, they are incapacitated by security force robots. Jacob is dragged back to his cell, but he's contacted by Dr. Marla, who says that she had the robot carrying Danny rerouted to her location, and that she can help her, but she needs Jacob's help. Not only that, but she can get Jacob to Warden Cole. After Marla releases him from his cell, Jacob makes his way through an old psych ward and arrives at a state-of-the-art lab. It's clear that the prison had been built around this lab with the sole purpose being human experimentation. Jacob confronts Marla, but says that the inhibitors she is giving to Danny will only slow the infection. Marla tells Jacob that Danny was on Europa when the attack happened, and using their core implants, Marla uploads Danny's memories to Jacob's core. Marla states that Danny needs an antidote, but that to synthesize it, Jacob needs to obtain a sample from the Warden's Alpha. When quizzed on what the Alpha is, Marla goes on to say that during the outbreak in the colony 75 years prior, they discovered a human that reached symbiosis with the infection to control it, and regain control of their functions as opposed to other infected who become little more than basic mindless grunts. This colonist was dubbed Subject Zero, but was killed during the sterilization of the Arcas Colony. She states that Warden Cole tried to recreate this alpha by releasing the infection into Black Iron's prison population, something he calls the Callisto Protocol, the next phase of human evolution. Marla leaves and ponders her role in all this and says that she belongs there in Black Iron. Jacob and Danny then leave to confront the Warden, but as they approach his tower, this happens.
And now you're inside Danny's memories, seeing the truth of Europa. A diluted test sample released from one of our labs. A tragedy that inspired everything Cole is doing here at Black Iron.
Let me go! Look at it! Look at it! What are you talking about? You see? Do you see?
Jacob, what do you got there?
What we got here is none of our business. Come on, we have a job to do.
This was our fault.
Lily! No!
Jacob leaves Danny's memories and he confronts the Warden. Cole is having a meeting with some masked individuals who welcome him as Vir Solitarius, which means lone man or the sole survivor. Jacob demands the antidote and wants to know where the Alpha is.
Where's the Alpha? Just give me the goddamn antidote! I'm not gonna let her die.
Your friend. I've been watching you. You and your so-called friend. You're not the innocent you claim to be. You've proven that you'll do just about anything to ensure your own survival.
And what about you, huh? Watching people die for fun? Is that your protocol?
No. You are mistaken, Mr. Lee. Protocol isn't about death. It's about life. Our future lies out there. Our destiny. But we were not built for life in space. This fragile shell holds us back. We have to evolve if we are to survive. And now, you'll all see why. Proof that my methods are worth the risk. final contest to determine the true survivor. Humanity or my hour.
Well, 5-2. You're really a thank you. At first I thought this was a curse, but then I realized it is a gift. Someone has opened my eyes, shown me my purpose. Now, I'm gonna show you.
Ferris and Jacob fight, and eventually Ferris gets the upper hand. Just about to kill Jacob, he transforms into a behemoth. After a long, arduous fight, Ferris is defeated, and Jacob gets the sample from him. Cole tries to reason with him, to give him the sample and to leave via an escape pod and go back to his old life. Danny walks in at this point and says she wants her sister back. She tries to shoot the warden, but of course, he isn't really there, he's a hologram. Jacob injects Danny with the synthesized antidote in front of the warden and says it doesn't matter, as the data they've collected from Black Iron will be used to initiate what he calls Phase 2 of the protocol. He then disconnects. Jacob and Danny, now perfectly fine, run to the escape pods, but there's only one. Jacob sacrifices himself as atonement for his part in what happened on Europa and gives Danny a sample of the lava. She then escapes whilst Jacob is left to fight a number of mutants. But Jacob doesn't die, he defeats the mutants and is contacted by Dr. Marla, saying that she knows another way out of Black Iron. Ferris, still alive, devolved again, appears, and the game then ends. So a fairly complicated story unless you know what to look for. A lot of what happened is learned through the obtaining of voice logs, so let's start at the beginning. Okay, so we need to delve into the scientific here. Now, I'm not an astrologist, so I'm not an expert by any means, but here goes. So our beautiful bright sun, which provides heat to such a degree that Earth can sustain organic life on it, will reach a stage called its red giant phase. Scientists theorize that this could be billions of years in the future, but that is essentially why humanity is looking at ways to terraform and colonize other parts of our solar system. The problem is that at the moment at least, any planets or moons further away from the sun than Earth is are simply too cold to inhabit. Earth's moon, it's theorized, could be terraformed as early as 2050, which is mad. Mars wouldn't be able to be colonized until around 2100. Now, 300 years from now, the time period in which this game takes place, it's considered likely that due to the expanse of the sun and global warming, at this time, large parts of the Earth would have been uninhabitable, hence the terraforming of Callisto in the game. Although scientists think that Callisto wouldn't be able to be terraformed until the sun reaches its red giant phase, in the game at least, the moon was warmed enough to sustain human life, and the levels of radiation on Callisto would have been safe enough for habitation.
No, they told us a new life awaits. Yeah, right, man, more like the same old shit. Look, I promise I'll get you out here real soon. Okay, I miss you.
On Callisto, Jupiter's dead moon, as a result of the terraforming, there were a colony of miners living and working there. They were sold a dream by the UJC. Their colony was known as Arcas, or Arcas Station. They were working for the UJC, mining for materials and valuable resources such as ore. This voice log from the mine supervisor, Darren Barr, details just how hard they were working.
Told them it was a complete waste of time, but UJC wasn't having it. Now they got my whole crew working OT. I just hope they find whatever it is they're looking for.
Whatever they were mining for wasn't there, or at least there was so little of it that the miners began to wonder what they were even digging for. But eventually the miners broke through the subsurface ocean of Callisto, which, due to the planet basically being a frozen rock, was covered with a sheet of thick ice. Well, the miners broke through the sheet of ice and out came a massive alien life form.
I've never seen anything like it. It came from down there, under the ice. The whole site's on lockdown. UJC's got a response team en route, but they gotta hurry. Something's happening. People are getting sick.
The colony admin, or I guess the guy in charge of this colony, Yannick Sage, made a voice log stating this.
I had no choice, couldn't let it spread. Oh, they were all disposable, of course, but what we found, what I found, it could be the key to everything.
A distress call was then sent out and the UJC security forces, at this point, based on nearby moon Europa, turned up and killed the massive life form, but the damage had been done.
Please, you gotta help me.
Sir, I need you to calm down.
No, it's in my hand.
I need you to calm down and answer the question. Now, when was your first exposure?
Please, it hurts.
The alien's belly was filled with small parasites, and these parasites had infected a large part of, if not all of the colonists living and working in Arcas Station. The UJC scientists heard about the symptoms the colonists were exhibiting. According to Marla later on in the game, the symptomology was intriguing, yet familiar. They dealt with something similar before. A couple of times in the game the word Paramo is mentioned, or more specifically the Paramo effect. The symptomology the scientists thought was intriguing and familiar was the previous discovery of accelerated evolution in a South American mountain range, namely the Northern Andean Paramo, which stretches across Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and Peru. What they discovered was an ecosystem or an evolutionary hotspot, and scientists consider it the fastest evolving region on Earth. That's what they mean when they refer to the Paramo effect. Anyway, the UJC wanted to understand and study the disease. They could then re-engineer it to unlock, as they put it, the secrets of the Paramo effect. The aim was to essentially achieve the goal of accelerated human evolution.
UJC's gathering everybody up in the Hightown Square for vaccinations. We're finally getting out of here.
So that voice log from a colonist shows us that the UJC were gathering the colonists and miners in the Hightown Square for jabs. They wouldn't receive a jab at all. The UJC obtained what they needed to obtain, which were thousands of larvae from the life form, and they took these samples back to their lab on Europa. So, with the required materials obtained, the UJC began sterilizing the colony. Nothing could get out.
Jerica, are you there? You see the UJC response beam. For the love of the gods, run the other way. I'm on the platform. Headed back to Arcas.
According to public knowledge, though, Arcas was only abandoned and not sterilized. The colony was then sealed, much like that of a tomb. With the colony dealt with, the scientists got to work, and they called the project Directive 1A. The scientists then discovered their prize, leading to the next stage of their project. An alpha, a person they called and referred to as Subject Zero. This was a colonist who got infected but achieved what is known as symbiosis with the infection, now called the biophage. Essentially, Subject Zero was infected, but could control the biophage, unlike other subjects who just turned into mindless brutes. This subject, to the scientists at least, was the next phase in human evolution. The only problem was that Subject Zero was killed during the sterilization process. Over the next 75 years, they built a lab on Callisto using holding rooms for various test subjects, and then they built a prison around it, calling it Black Iron Prison, with the previous holding rooms being turned into a psych ward. With this prison on top of the lab, which was itself located at the heart of the prison, this would provide a cover for what the UJC was doing. Right? Wrong. They didn't care about that at all. Black Iron Prison was some kind of experiment. The prisoners were the test subjects. With the prison being on a dead moon and being a maximum security prison, this was essentially the last stop in an inmate's life. Once you're inside, you're not getting out. Ever. This research came to a halt when a new prison warden was appointed named Warden Norton. Norton was by the book, and her chief security officer Leon Ferris respected her for that and enjoyed serving underneath her authority. The UJC continued its terraforming project for a while in the view that, much like neighbouring moon Europa, it too could one day be a thriving civilization. This project wouldn't last that long though. Warden Norton was abruptly replaced by a new warden, Warden Duncan Cole, much to the surprise of the people working on terraforming Callisto.
Just got the call. The UJC is pulling the plug on terraforming Callisto. Why now? After spending billions.
Warden Cole then resumed Directive 1A and appointed Dr. Caitlin Marler to oversee the project as the Chief Medical Officer.
Personal log, Dr. Caitlin Marler. Arrived at Black Iron today. Met Cole for the first time. He's authorized me to restart the program. It won't be easy, but I trust in my team. They, as I, understand the promise here. The opportunity that lies ahead.
Now, Cole was very meticulous in his attempts to achieve his goal and to make this vision a reality. Essentially, humans aren't built for life in space, that in order to travel and live in space for long periods of time, evolution needs to take over, and humans need to be able to adapt. But Cole himself wasn't working alone. He was part of a shady organization called Callipolis, which dated back centuries.
This will be my final report from here. The tower renovations are nearly complete. And the program reactivated under the supervision of Dr. Mahler. And what do you hope to achieve? Results after decades of misguided research. Don't you see? Evolution doesn't happen in the lab. It happens in the wild.
Those of you familiar with Plato's dialogues will also be familiar with the name Socrates. I won't go deep into it here, but Callipolis itself means beautiful city. According to Socrates, his vision of the ideal city. I guess Callipolis knew that in order to build this beautiful city, humans would need to evolve. The Callipolis would hold meetings in a secret room underneath Black Iron Prison to discuss this. Not only that, Callipolis were active in the colony too, as another Callipolis meeting was located down in the transport hub, meaning that colony admin Yannick Sage was part of Callipolis. But he refers to something called the Circle, but currently I'm unsure what this means. Maybe Callipolis used to be called the Circle using this symbol, but then rebranded, if you like. I don't know. But anyway, back to Cole. Over the next 6 months, Marla and her team would watch the biophage in action, and they would note various mutations from the basic mindless brute known as a grunt, to the strange mutations they labelled corruptors, mutants capable of active camouflage, and combustors, which, well, you can guess. Marla herself noted the physiological changes in subject behaviour, whilst others would observe the mental changes. The scientists would observe inmates in their cells from behind one-way glass after the inmate had been infected with the biophage. One particular course of observation from Dr. Ismene shows us how this went.
Observation log. Subject 324-980 exhibits an intriguing mix of characteristics, most notably an enhanced will to survive. Recommend extraction and induction into the program. After 2 weeks in the program, Subject 324-980 exhibits remarkable physical enhancements, though his mental state is deteriorating rapidly. Flag the subject for Mahler. Maybe this will help get Cole off our backs. Subject 324-980. Can you hear me?
Me? Can you hear me? I can hear it in my head. Make it stop! Make it stop!
At some point during their research, Dr. Mahler sent a team led by Dr. Xian Yun to the old transport hub for the Arcas Colony.
Mission log 001, Dr. Yun reporting. We've just arrived at the old transport hub. It's been sealed like a tomb for the past 75 years. Preliminary readings are inconclusive, but there's no immediate evidence of a breach in the containment zone.
After 75 years, everything seemed okay. That is, until it wasn't. The team were attacked by the former colonists who survived and escaped the sterilization, now horrifically mutated specimens that had evolved in the darkness, becoming completely blind, but hunting by sound.
Mission log supplemental. Dr. Yun reporting. They came out of nowhere. Killed Sandy and Warren. They must have escaped from Arcas, trapped for decades, evolving and adapting down here in the dark. I've contacted Mahler, requested immediate evac. I just hope she sends help soon.
Well, that evac never arrived. Yoon's whole team died.
Those things, they killed them all. My whole team is gone. I tried to restart that old platform to get back to Arcas, but there was no power. I can hear them. They're everywhere. They're getting closer. Dr. Mahler, if you hear this, did you know what was down here? Did you know?
Now, quite what Mahler was hoping to find down there was unknown. Maybe another alpha. After 6 months of research, Warden Cole and Callipolis were starting to get a bit restless. They were waiting for Mahler and her team to make a breakthrough in their search for ways to replicate Subject Zero, or rather the characteristics of said subject. Behind Mahler's back, Cole had lava transported from Callisto to Europa using civilian contractors in the hope Mahler wouldn't notice. He'd used UJC cargo pilots who thought they were just transporting medical supplies, but underneath these supplies were tubes containing the parasitic lava. Two of these contractors were Jacob Lee, pilot of the UJC Charon, and Max Barrow, his first officer. Now, they were being paid a lot of money, so much so that they'd effectively be able to retire after these cargo runs. Jacob and Max knew that their cargo was highly questionable, having found the tubes underneath the medical supplies, but they didn't look inside the tubes, as Jacob puts it, it was none of their business. But then a tragedy occurred. A leak from the UJC lab on Europa using a much weaker pathogen resulted in the infection and death of a lot of people, including young children. Max was distraught, naturally being a father himself, due to the part they played in it, and it caused major tension between him and Jacob.
Personal log. We're docked at Callisto hangar. Confined to quarters while they load the cargo. Max has been on my case about these Europa runs. We've done jobs like this before. Don't know why he cares so much now. I mean, it's just a job. Gotta keep your head down and your mouth shut. Kaya, it's Max. I need your advice. Did you see the footage? That poor kid. I keep trying to talk about it with Jacob. It's like he won't listen. Come on, cargo's loaded. Final check. Look, this can't all be a coincidence.
But Cole, on the other hand, was inspired.
My patience is at an end, Muller. It's been close to 6 months.
But we're close to understanding the biophage, to harnessing it. I just need more time.
No. What happened on Europa
Was a tragedy.
was a revelation.
The UJC then doctored footage to cover their own involvement in the Europa tragedy by using the UJC propaganda machine to pin the tragedy on a known group called the Outer Way, led by Danny Nakamura, who just so happened to be on Europa when the tragedy occurred, and it claimed the life of her younger sister Lily. Talk about wrong place, wrong time. The Outer Way were painted as a terrorist group by the UJC propaganda purely because they were a threat to the oppressive UJC. Lone attacks across the sector were blamed on the Outer Way because they were an easy scapegoat. If you want an idea of what the UJC were like, think of the United Citizen Federation from Starship Troopers. There are great propaganda ad sections in the Helix Station podcasts too. Anyway, Danny then gathered her fellow Outer Way cohorts, and then the game's opening moments take place. The Outer Way board Jacob's ship looking for revenge for the death of Danny's sister, and of course to look for answers. Cole and Callipolis wanted to achieve something called the commonality, and during the confrontation at the end, he is heard speaking to his fellow Callipolis members, and Cole states that they have almost achieved commonality, which is defined as the state of sharing features or attributes.
Tonight, while the prison sleeps, I will take matters into my own hands. I will release Mahler's experiments into the wild. No more talk. The time has come for action, and I know that I am right. Computer, initiate the Callisto Protocol.
Whilst Jacob was sleeping and having nightmares about his mate Max tormenting him due to his guilt about Europa, Cole released the specimens into the prison population and all hell broke loose. Prisoners were being isolated, but this did little. Pretty much everyone ended up dead or infected.
There's no room. Patients stacked in the hall. The first case came in an hour ago, and they just keep coming. We're losing control. We have to find Mahler. Where the hell is she?
They tried to evacuate the prison, but tram systems were shut down by Ferris, determined to not let any inmates escape.
Sir, we have to evacuate. Negative, we have to contain this. Not a single inmate is escaping on my watch. But sir, you don't understand. They're not inmates. Not anymore.
A prison gang were let loose due to the chaos and started killing guards and inmates.
I had to fall back. There were too many. They captured my entire squad. Please, you have to send someone. I don't know how long that door will hold. Get him! Oh God, no! No!
The warden's wish to have science let loose into the wild was now a reality. His search for the Alpha, or rather Subject Alpha, was underway, and it just so happened that Ferris himself turned out to be the Alpha. He achieved symbiosis with the biophage. I think that Ferris was infected prior to this scene, which essentially allowed him to survive falling out of this window, and the injuries he sustained potentially accelerated his evolution and mutation, much like the final battle where if he gets damaged enough, he'll mutate into his final form. So the ending of this game set up either a sequel or the DLC, which will be coming in the summer. It also turned out that Cole wasn't even there in person. He was somewhere else entirely. He stated that they, Callipolis, have obtained the results from the first phase of the Callisto Protocol and will move to phase 2 of their plan. This isn't finished, not by a long shot. The ending showed Jacob atoning for his mistakes and costing Dani her younger sister's life by sacrificing himself, giving her the only escape pod, and giving her the evidence that she needed in order to clear her name back on Europa. Jacob, unbeknownst to Dani, was able to fight off the mutants attacking him, and was contacted by Dr. Marla, who told him there may be a way out of Black Iron, which was set to self-destruct by Cole. Then of course, Ferris appears, this could have been a hallucination, and the game then ends. Some are theorizing that Jacob could actually himself be another Subject Alpha, that he was infected right at the start of the game, and that the implant into his brainstem was the disease, and that Jacob kept the disease at bay with the health injectors, but I don't buy that. Because Elias also had the implant, had been there half of his life, and wasn't pumping himself full of health juice. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, but for now, take care and I'll see you in the next one.